So looking into the uses of some of this knowledge, daily uses. So this, depending on which nostril's flowing, it's better for different things, as I've been kind of alluding to all along here. And here I've laid out kind of just over the day simple things you can do to align with this energy flow. And what this does is it ensures success in your activities. The more you're aligned with this, it gives you more assurance that what you do will bear fruit and will be in line with that energy. So basically, upon waking, you want to determine the dominant side, the dominant nostril that's operating for that day. And you can move your hand over the dominant side of the face and then place that dominant foot down on the ground. And that will sync up your energy through the day to have that forward moving energy through the rest of your day. I put switches necessary, so if you are paying attention to either the days of the week or the titi, which to align your breath, which my recommendation is the titi. That's what I've been taught. But it can be a lot to kind of do all this. So at minimum, put down the dominant foot. But if you are aligning with these other ones, then you can switch to the auspicious nostril for that day. Okay, the days of the week are easy enough to remember, but the titi is a little more specific. But you can use the tools to switch it before you get out of bed. Say a little prayer, all that before you get out of bed that day can help as well. And then when you are leaving the house, you can use your dominant foot as well to leave the house, especially on important days or important tasks you want to set out to do. Remember to lead with that dominant foot as you leave your house. Sunrise and sunset, I've said this before, but that's when Sushumna is more open and more readily open. Is at those times, and that's why those times are really recommended for practices. And it's the best. Sushumna is the best for meditation, and really the only thing you want to do when Sushumna is open, as I mentioned. Day practices are considered a bit more on the rajasic side, more outgoing side, while practicing at night can bring in a little more tamasic energy into your practices. So it's at those junction points that's a little more ideal, when things are balanced and the energy is more available for a deeper practice. So as much as you can to set that up, do what you can with your life. Eating is best done with the right side dominant. So this is a really practical way. I've mentioned this like in the free lectures and whatnot, but eating is best done with that right nostril open. So you don't have to do this for every single meal, but this is particularly important if you do have digestive issues and it's hard for you to digest your meals, your agni is kind of low, or if you are going to anticipate eating a larger meal, especially like lunch might be a good time for this. Switch over the nostril to the right side, and it will make a difference if you're sensitive to this thing. I use this all the time, and it's very useful. Another tip is the more consciously you can shift this throughout the day, it can help with different problems. So if you feel a headache just starting to come on, or even if you have something like chronic asthma, if you feel an attack coming on, as soon as you feel that shift starting to come on, you shift a nostril, and that'll shift the energetic balance in your body, because this really affects your whole kind of physiology and how things are working in the body. So it can have an effect. So any kind of, if you're getting in a bad mood, or if you feel bloated, or any number of things it can be used for. If you want to try to shift the situation around, just try shifting your nostril. Like if you're you can experiment with it, but it's one use. And so this consciously shifting it multiple times throughout the day can actually act as its own kind of rasayana and rejuvenation for the system if you're running into problems. So use it sparingly. You don't want to just keep shifting constantly, but if you do find yourself in some issues, do that. Or if you find like the nostril dominating for way too long, 3 hours or something, then that's usually a sign something's getting overworking for various reasons. Shift your nostril, and it can help. When going to sleep, It's recommended to use sleep on the left side, and this encourages the right side being open and during the night. And this helps to balance. It's considered in the text that the lunar quality is more dominant at nighttime, and the solar quality is more dominant during the day. So ideally, to balance out that kind of lunar quality during the day, sleeping on your left side will close off the lunar nadi, open up the right nadi, and this also helps the body process things while you're sleeping and the digestion happening. The only tricky thing with this is that is the more active side of the brain. So if you do have problems falling asleep, often it might create a little too much activity for you. So you can, if you do have problem sleeping, you can try to lay on the right side, and that'll get that more lunar kind of quality going for you, and that might help you get to sleep. And oftentimes people even just naturally switch sides of sleeping in their sleep, which has to do with the balancing of the nadis actually, and you do that subconsciously often. But it's just a good way to start, because one thing with this knowledge too is it's important how you start an activity. Just like in Jyotish, where you start the activity with sets up the balance for the rest of the activity. So it'll make a difference how you're starting things. And sleeping on the stomach's the worst. Just the worst. It's considered to cause death in the text. Sleeping on your back is considered to imbalance the system. So you actually do want to choose one or the other for your daily kind of living. And if you sleep on your left side most of the time and switch over to right once in a while, not a big deal. It's not going to kill you. But just from what I've been taught, sleeping on the left side is more ideal. Once again, I've already mentioned this a little about hours, but if the flow is too long in one side for many days, so sometimes you can have, heavy flow in one side predominant for many days, it can show that it can either cause, or it can also be a sign that an illness is coming on, or some psychological issue is going on or coming on, and it's something to watch out for. A constant Sushumna flow can be a suggest that death is actually coming. If you just find for days on end your Sushumna is flowing, then you might want to be careful. Something to watch out for. I have no experience with that, but it is something that's mentioned. Going about your day-to-day activities, if you are like going for a job interview, or if you're trying to negotiate business, or if you're a teacher or something, if you're going to a meeting, right nostril is that dominant, outgoing, active energy. It's the best nostril for kind of convincing people and talking to people, and having that open is good. If you can't switch your nostril, say before you have an interview or something like that, if you're talking to a group or people, it's best to have your dominant nostril towards that person, as that'll give a similar effect. It's not ideal, but that's the second best option if you find you can't switch it. And I've actually used this in job interviews before, and it's interesting. Without fail, whenever I've had the right dominant, I've gotten the position. I have had tricky times where I just couldn't switch it, and it would be kind of somewhere in the middle. That's how the interview went. And I remember I almost got it. That happened in one interview, and it's like I almost got the job and they wanted to hire me, but then some weird things happened, and it ultimately ended up falling through. So and part of that's karma and other things, but the stuff can help. It can help as long as other factors are in play as well. And then socializing, softer activities better with Ida dominant. So if you're just hanging out with friends, or playing games or something like that, then it can help. You don't have to, but if you notice you're being too critical around people, go away and switch your nostril or something, and it might help. Or if you're getting creative and want to do a creative project or something, the lunar nostril can help being open. And there is some basic functions. So like I alluded to before, there is uses in this, like with astrology and answering moments of the question. But if you're having a hard time deciding what to do during the day, one way to go about this is generally the left nostril is considered auspicious and the right nostril is considered inauspicious. So that's a very, very basic way to go about answering question. If you should or shouldn't do something, I tend to actually look at what what's the dominance for the day. So what nostril is supposed to be operating that day, or titi, per the cycles, which gives it the most energy behind it. And when you align those certain factors, which you can use when you get more familiar with it, or if someone's approaching you with a question, if they approach you where on the nostril of your dominant side, then usually that means yes to whatever they may be asking about. Or if they approach you and you notice it's on the side of your less dominant nostril, then it's a no. And if it's in the middle, then it's who knows. But if they approach you from the front, then it can go either way. But it's a basic approach, but it can be handy from time to time. I would not suggest using this all the time for all your decisions during the day, but you use this stuff sparingly and per what your intuition tells you to. And once again, this goes back to laying the groundwork, because if you're not relatively in balance, then this kind of using this for this kind of purpose can give incorrect information, incorrect knowledge with which to act on. But it can be a go-to if you use it sparingly, and as intuition develops for when the right moment is to use it, it can be used with some effect to make a decision with. And usually, it should be something you're having a hard time with, and you can't make up your mind. Then you can go do something like this. As I've mentioned, earth and water element are the best for auspicious activities if those are flowing at the moment, as well as yoga practice. Traditional hatha practice is recommended when the earth and water element are flowing. Otherwise, fire, nostril, once again, those are inauspicious, kind of separative kind of energies coming into play. Air is very dispersive, fire is hot and burning, so not ideal for general kind of activities unless you need that energy behind you. But it can create issues, especially if you're doing auspicious practices or hatha yoga and things like that. You can create injuries in the system if you're not careful. So something, just a further consideration. And then sushumna, ether element, if those are flowing, those are reserved for spiritual or meditative works only. Once again, I've already mentioned this, but sushumna is beyond the elements. And, this really goes back to the idea of spirituality as being something beyond any physical activity. So even though the Ida or the Pingala may be flowing, and we'll get into some of these associations later, but just because they're flowing, any act we do in the world is still considered in the world. It's not a spiritual act. Spirituality, technically within these sciences, has to do with liberation and nothing to do with anything in the manifest world. So even though we are maybe doing prayers or mantras or an auspicious ceremony or charity work or something like that, that may aid, it may help in our spiritual evolution. However, ultimately, that's really not a spiritual action. Spiritual action is really, meditation and completely turning away from the world. That's really the deepest meaning of spirituality, is looking towards liberation and being free of material existence, to the most subtle level. So, important thing to think about and reflect on, and your own kind of view and how spirituality works into it. But that is what the teachings of these systems are, and I find it a very deep system in that regards, because it has that viewpoint. It really transcends a lot of other things I've seen with a lot of other systems, which all have their place and are all well and good, and being a good person, doing charity is fine and beautiful, and helps set a ground for deeper work. But unless you go beyond literally everything, every thought, every action, every deed, you're not going to get the true depth of what these sciences are talking about. So I've made a slide here for the uses of the lunar nadi, and these I've collected from what I've been taught from the ancient texts, from different lectures I've attended. And these are just to give you a general idea of what these uses are. It's not a catch-all be-all list, but it gives you some ideas, and it goes well with some of the other lectures we've been doing. So if you've been working through the Muhurta lectures, then you should already be familiar with kind of this general pattern. And these kind of activities usually have to do more with the Monday, Thursday, Friday kind of activities, those softer, more auspicious kind of activities, jewelry, clothing, the arts, socializing, peaceful things, building a home, which might seem like an active activity, but it's that idea of creating a nurturing space and building a home is why it's on this list. Traveling is on this list, and some of these overlap between the lists, so you have to think about what your use of traveling is. So if it's more of a restful recreational type of traveling, then maybe starting it on the Lunar Nadi might help, or just more of a arduous kind of journey, hard undertaking you're gonna go under, then Pingala might be more conducive to your list. So I'm not going to go through all these. It's quite a list. Read through them, reflect on them, and more importantly, when you're paying attention to the Swara flow throughout the days, you'll notice shifts in your being and how you act and how you feel, and you'll start to see how it aligns with different activities better. So part of all this knowledge is yukti and your own understanding of pulling out the specific applications of how this stuff really plays out in your day. So a lot of the, I'm giving you the frameworks and the patterns, but you need to apply it and reflect on it and use it and see it for yourself, how you're going to use it in those day-to-day situations. But it's a long list, and just get in touch if you're confused on any of them, and I'll see what I can do to explain them for you. And then moving on to the Pingala uses, once again, you'll notice these are a lot different from the lunar uses, in that they're usually things that require more aggressive kind of energy, more powerful kind of energy. Poisoning an enemy, negative kind of actions are more effective when they're done with the Pingala usage. So anytime you're doing something, harsh, or if you want to gain control of something, if you want to impress your point about something, put something in, any of these kind of things, you can look down, it's a long list. You want this energy coming. And I don't advocate, gambling or stealing or any of these kind of activities while this energy is being gone about. It will defunct you in the long run, and why all the groundwork's been laid before, and also why I don't just put this out there in general. It is out there. You can buy books on this stuff, not many, but this knowledge can get in the hands of wrong people and used in the wrong ways. There is a lot of black magic in India and other places. It's effective, and it can affect people strongly. So use it judiciously is all I'll say. But if you've gotten to this point, then hopefully you know that well, and you've jumped over the hurdles. And this is only the beginning of this knowledge. So that's all I want to cover. I think that's enough, especially if you're new to this kind of information. It can't be a lot to put together, because this is a little more subtle aspect, and it's not pranayama. It shouldn't be confused with a pranayama practice. Pranayama can assist and aid in this, but this is, this knowledge really cuts to the depths of who we are, and so it takes a lot of attention. And so I recommend just beginning with some type of Swara journal, or you can take notes somewhere to see what's happening in your day-to-day life. And you just want to keep on this for like at least a few days, just to kind of see that what I'm talking about makes sense, and it's actually reflected in your physiology. But to do extended periods of time is pretty nice, because then you'll see all the different shifts and how it affects you. At least take maybe a week, but ideally, to really understand it deeply and start to work with it in balance can take years to master. Even this basic stuff can take long time to get your energy, because the whole idea is to use this knowledge balance your energy, to move away from things that imbalance you, and so that you can start to engender open nadis and free flowing of the sushumna, and start to gain control over your prana and all these deeper aspects of the knowledge. So we're starting on the most basic level, but and it has uses and day-to-day uses, but don't just get stuck there. It's not just to get a good job at all. That's the most superficial use. Even the astrological uses and using it to answer questions is valid, and it's a big part of it's a part of astrology, and along with reading hands and all these other kind of esoteric arts. It's one piece of the puzzle, though. You always want to use the charts when you're doing astrology, but astrologers will utilize this as one more tool to add confluence to what they're doing. But we're just starting to get aware of it here. But keep in mind that ultimately this is a spiritual practice meant to take you to the highest. And the more in tune you become with the breath, you'll be able to switch what you're doing naturally. But more importantly, you might notice that your breath starts to shift with the activity you're doing to flow in the proper manner at the appropriate time. So if you are giving a speech, you may notice that your breath naturally flows to the right, or if you are socializing, your breath may naturally flow to the left. So as you do become more in tune with some of this, your breath can flow. It's quite interesting to watch happen, and the shifts can be sudden too. So like if you need a lot of right nostril energy because you need to attend to something really quick because there was an accident and you need active energy, then you might notice the right nostril will open up really quick, and it's something I've noticed. So all this stuff you'll notice the more you pay attention to. So anyways, I'm going to leave you there to work with that, and this is a topic that I'm really interested in because it's a little more subtle, but it's observable in day-to-day actions in a very direct manner. So please get in touch if you start working with this, and please share your experiences, or if you do keep a journal, please share things you've been noticing, and I'd be really, really interested to hear this. Yeah, so that's the beginning of it all, and I hope this has been interesting and useful for you, and namaskar.